What's up, Ignite? Thanks again to the youth worship band for working this week and pulling together a couple of songs that we're able to then premiere. I know most of you have just watched that live premiere that released from our worship team. Thank you guys for that. As you're finding your way over here to our live broadcast, welcome. Glad to have you. We're kind of having a bit of a garage theme today. So the worship team was live, was recorded in someone's garage. And now you're taking a look at me in mine. My garage functions very much as a workshop. And I'm going to show you a couple of things to kind of pull together how God works and how he processes in our lives. Because God is actively shaping us. And I want to talk about those processes today. Ignite, we are so glad to be able to continue to broadcast to you on Saturday nights. Once upon a time when this was just a normal year, months and months ago when we were doing long-range planning for the year, we looked at the patterns that were out in summertime. People going away on vacations and just sort of summer jobs and different availabilities. And what we did last summer is we actually stopped meeting every week and started doing occasional activities. And it is likely that we're going to transition to something somewhat different relatively soon. I know for most, if not all of you, you have finished your school years. So congratulations on that. I know that it was hard process shifting to the digital learning and doing school from home and not being in the classroom and not seeing your friends, not being able to gather together for Ignite. It is good for us to be able to do this. But somewhere here soon, we're probably going to shift to kind of more of a summer vibe. And we're in the process of working out those details. So be watching. We'll make sure to communicate through emails and text messages to make sure you know what's going on. So now that you're finding your ways over here, welcome, Ignite. It is Saturday night, Ignite live stream. I'm going to talk for a while, do a little bit of a teaching. Then we will shift over to our live Zoom so that we can have some face-to-face interaction. Because I have shifted out of the studio, which is actually just Josiah's bedroom, into the garage, I actually can't see all the way over there to the texts that are showing up in the chat. So my lovely assistant, Heather, who is at a computer and is able to type, she'll be responding to you. But I just apologize from this distance. I can't see it. But I wanted to be able to show you some things. So we've come out to the workshop because there's a great work that is going on. God is actively in the process of shaping us for his kingdom, craft us, because we have work to do, right? If you were on the Bible study this week, to be done. And the reality is that we come into the story a little rough, right? A little rough around the edges. Process of shaping to happen, there's some stuff that has to play out. And so I'm going to talk about some of those because I am a firm believer that God, who understands the human brain, loves to use concrete, factual, right? I don't want to take God for granted, but he is, in fact, faithful and steadfast and trustworthy and consistent and all of those things that are intimated by the concept of a rock. So I kind of want to talk to you about some of this process. And I want to draw on several scriptures to kind of play it out. So first, in John chapter 13, Jesus is talking to his disciples. It's the night before he's betrayed. He's there in the upper room, and he gets down from the table to wash his disciples' feet, which is just an incredible image of the servant heart of God, that he would wash his own followers' feet. I mean, what an image. But the way this plays out is he uses the word washed and he uses the word pruned. Now, so I don't know if you've ever done gardening. I know some of you Ignite, we planted some things. Many of you got them to grow. I've planted some of those things that we grew out in my own garden. out here and they're growing. But there's a process that plays out. So if you've never watched somebody do a bonsai tree, to trim and shape a bonsai tree, go find a YouTube video. It's fascinating work. They make these trees bend, and then they snip a little thing, and then the tree ends up, looking kind of all funky. But they do a process called pruning, right? And in pruning, we cut away pieces of the plant that are not helpful for its growth pattern or helpful for its fruit bearing, right? So every year, a peach tree, you trim away the branches that aren't going to give you peaches, so that it does bear really healthy, good, fruitful peaches. But that process of pruning is a little painful, and it's a little shocking. If the first time God decides to do a little pruning in your life, you're like, whoa, God, what are you doing? But as Peter was there and Jesus is washing his feet, he's like, whoa, I don't know about this. And Jesus said, I have to do some pruning because you're going to be fruitful. If you look at John chapters 13, 14, 15, you see Jesus is very much talking about the fruitfulness of his disciples, that they would be able to do things, live life, so that the long-term effect is beneficial for his kingdom. And one of the images that he gives is of the gardener pruning branches that aren't any good, so that the other branches will be effective. Another place we see this in the book of Jeremiah, God invites Jeremiah to go down to the potter's house, where the potter is sitting at the wheel and he's forming the clay into a shape. And I'm going to try to illustrate that a little bit concretely with some wood. So this piece of wood is really rough on this side, like splinters sticking out. It's not ready to be used in joining it with other wood to make a pretty piece of furniture, any of that. And so one of the tools that the carpenter might use is a plane. And basically what a plane does is it has a sharp blade here. And as I push that blade across the wood, it scrapes away small pieces of wood. And as it scrapes them away, the wood gets smoother and smoother and smoother. So that down here where I've worked a little bit, this is like smooth, like it's been sanded. Now, there's a process here. It takes a while. I'd have to sit and plane at this for a while to make the whole side beautiful. But this process, it reminds me of what God's doing. All right, so young people, you got enormous destinies ahead of you, right? You've got amazing futures. You've been called and gifted to impact the world for the kingdom. You have good works to do, right? As we read Ephesians chapter 2, we've been created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God created beforehand so that we could walk in those. But how are we going to do them, and how are we going to get ready for them? And what's that preparing process look like? So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. So I don't know if you've ever had a chance to head out to some workshop or build something or work together, but there's some processes that play out that are definitely part of my experience in walking with Christ. So I've got here, it's a piece of poplar wood. One of the things that I've seen in the workshop that is a concrete example of the abstract thing I've encountered in life is that sometimes there's a binding. Sometimes I feel a little trapped, even in my own life. And it's almost as if what I want to do, God isn't going to allow me to do because he's got something that he's working on. I don't always know what it is. But sometimes I feel sort of a clamping, a pressure that's keeping me from being able to do just the thing I thought I wanted to do. And that clamping is God working to get you ready for some shaping. And so there are times when you're like, God, I don't understand why I'm in this relationship and these realities and these experiences. Like, what is going on that I would be here? But the advantage is that when God gets you sort of clamped down in the right place, he is then able to do some serious shaping. And so you're able to become sharper and more focused and more prepared for the work that he's called you to. you're able to grow rapidly towards your destiny because he's got you where he needs you. And so there may be a time, maybe this year, maybe next, maybe it's 10 years away, I don't know, when you may stop and go, I don't understand why I'm in this situation. And it's a time for you to stop. It's a time for you to stop and say, God, do you have me here because you need to work on me? Do you have me here because there's something you're trying to do? Because the reality is God is always at work. He is incredibly active in our lives. He is shaping us. He is molding us. He is creating us to be functional in his kingdom. And as he continues to do this, he's able to create the shape that he needs for the work that he needs done. He's able to get away the stuff that doesn't belong. Because you and I both know that there are attitudes in us. There are wounds in us. There are things in us that keep us hindered from walking in God and fulfilling his kingdom. And God is going to relentlessly pursue those so that you are ready for his destiny. Sometimes the very thing that's going on is that you've been wounded, right? There's been something in your life that has just cracked into you and it hurt, right? And that wound isn't something that God maybe intended. It's sometimes things happen that we're not excited about, but it leaves a little scar. Do you see this dent right here? Right, I just whacked this piece of wood with a hammer, and it did not like it. It scarred it. It marred it. It wounded it. And as I look at my life, I realize there are wounds in my life that when they happened, they were incredibly painful. And I didn't know how to process them, and I didn't know what to do with them. But as I look back, as I reflect on all that God has done, what I realize is that wound was immediately part of how God was shaping me, because he works for good in our lives. This wound affects the look of this piece. But as I continue to submit to the work of God, as I continue to submit to his shaping, it affects the shaping, but it doesn't ruin it, and it doesn't end it, and it doesn't make it that I'm no longer functional. It doesn't make it that I'm disqualified. It doesn't hinder me from building the kingdom. It doesn't ruin what's going on. And because of that, things are able to change. So I want to ask you, are you willing to stop and look up? Hey, God, what are you doing? Because the reality is that if you are, though there is still a wound here, it is no longer affecting the functionality of this piece of wood. There is still a very small little place. It's part of the story, right? But as we continue to submit to God's work, he can prepare us for our destiny and good works that we are called to. Right? There is a reality that is available to us if we are willing to submit to his ongoing present work. And the wounds of our lives, the times that things are they're uncomfortable, it is so often that God uses the uncomfortable to show me my need for his work. He'll show me my need for him to work through the angry attitude that bubbles up out of me when I'm in an experience. I'm like, wow, where'd that attitude come from? Jesus, can you do something with that attitude in me? And it's amazing how he will use things to sharpen us. Now, I don't know which child, but some child of mine left this outside. It got rained on. It's got some rust on it. And I want to point you to a Proverbs, one of the Proverbs. Now, Proverbs is an incredibly uncomfortable book because there's a lot of wisdom there that you got to learn the hard way. One of the things that I've observed in the book of Proverbs is that sometimes things sound like, oh, that's so, what a great truth that is. And then you experience it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the most painful thing ever. What was I thinking? So the one I want you to think of on is Proverbs 27:17. And Proverbs 27:17 says, just as an iron sharpens an iron, so one man sharpens another. Now, I want to be sharp. I want to be an incredibly sharp tool in the hand of the master that he can build the kingdom through me. I want to be sharp, but I get sharp as iron sharpens iron. So I want to ask you, do you like this sound? Because this is how iron sharpens iron. A file, right? This is just a nail. This is a file. It's a piece of metal with some grooves in it that allows small shavings of metal to come off of other things. But as it rubs against this, sure enough, makes it sharper. But I want to ask you, when was the last time something in your life rubbed you wrong and scraped against you and just caused you to have a horrible experience? What if that's iron sharpening iron? What if that's iron sharpening iron? You see, the reality is the way we get sharper is we bump up against each other. We learn from each other. And sometimes that means that I'm going to share something with him like, hey, I noticed this in you. And there may be something in your life that needs to mature, something that needs to grow, something needs to go away, something needs to change. Maybe you see something in me, you're like, hey, Nathan, you need to work on this. And I'm like all abrasive, like, you telling me I need to change? You telling me I guess I'm not perfect. But the reality is that if we will submit to the process, if we will submit to what God is doing, to how he is sending his people to equip us, if we'll submit to his word and we'll submit to his spirit and we'll submit to his call and we'll submit to the ongoing life-changing work that he is doing, he'll shape us for great purpose. One of these two I rubbed on for a while and it got shiny. And one of them was left out in the rain. It's gotten dull. Right? The reality is that this gets shiny because I sand the rust off. And some of you, like me, got some rusty edges. And I think God will work on it. And I think that one of the best things that we can do is invite him to clean us up. That one of the best things that we can do is invite him to work on us. If we'll invite him to work on us, if we'll submit to the working, if we'll allow him to bind us into sometimes even uncomfortable experiences, if we'll allow him to lead us into truth, if we'll allow him to wash us in his word and to prune away those things that don't belong, what we will discover is that little by little, he'll prepare us for his kingdom. As I look back, I realize there's a whole lot of my life that has changed. I'm in my 40s now. There's a lot of things I used to do, used to think, used to believe, that little by little God has shaped. And as he has shaped me, it's left some residue behind. There's some things I've had to give up, things I've left behind. But I look and I realize that I am more fit for the master's work today than I was 20 years ago, than I was 25 years ago, or for that matter, 3 years ago. Like, the reality is there is an ongoing shaping that God is doing, getting you and I ready to build the kingdom. My question for you, will you let him? Will you submit to the master's hand so that God can shape you? Will you submit to the master's hand so that he can prepare you for the works to which you've been called? Because he's got good works for us. And he's prepared those beforehand so that we could walk in them. But to do that, it's going to require some shaping. It's going to require some self-discipline on your part. You're going to need to read the word. You're going to need to submit to good godly leadership. You're going to need to make those choices to spend time in prayer rather than spending time just playing. Play too, right? But find time for prayer. Find time to let God shape you. Because that time in prayer, that time in the word, that time that you're submitted to godly leadership, it's time on the workbench. Time when you can be sharpened, when you can be filed down, when you can be sanded smooth, when you can be prepared for God's call in your life. And I hope that for you. I hope that you will submit to God's call, to God's preparing processes, to God's shaping, so that you too can be ready for all that he's doing. Let me pray for you, and then in a few moments, we'll go to our Zoom call. Lord, I just pray for the students of Ignite. And Lord, I pray that they would be yielded to you. Lord, I pray that they would yield their lives to you so that you can shape them. Lord, I thank you for the value that is already in them, the color, the shape, the grain, Lord, them that are already part of your puzzle. So that as you work in them, who they are becomes not just who they maybe might have could been, but who they really are. God, that you'll shape them into great men and women of God, great men and women of destiny, sharpened, effective tools in the hands of their God and their master to build a kingdom. Lord, would you bless them with fabulous destinies days to come. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Ignite, I love you guys. Proud of all that God's doing in you. Proud of what we're going to see in the years and days to come. Proud of what is going on. I just invite you, submit to the master's training. Submit to his shaping and his work. And bless his name even in the pain. Because it could be that he is working to shape you into something amazing. All right, we're going to head over to the Zoom call. Heather is going to open it up right now. Go ahead and say goodbye here. Head over to the Zoom call. We'll see you guys in a few minutes. And looking forward to hearing how your week is. I know everybody's done with school, or nearly everybody's done with school. And I'm excited about what this summer might look like. Love you guys. See you soon.